Hello Assassins, Gargudon here, and welcome to episode 21 of the Memory Corridor here in the ones who came before. Today we are continuing our retrospective looks at older Assassin's Creed titles, today focusing on 2015's Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Joining me for this is fellow The Ones Who Came Before team member ActualSpiderMan. Now, just before we dive into this, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do for the site and here in the AC community.
I'm ActualSpiderMan. I do all kinds of stuff for the community these days. Just recently got partnered with The Ones Who Came Before, so now I'm doing articles with them. Got a few up on the site if you want to check them out. Under ActualSpiderMan and Spider Mentor on Twitter. I unravel all kinds of stuff. I've been writing a long-standing project called Codex Temporis for the last 4 years, and got a subreddit going, with a little humble cell of mine, as I like to call them, trying to piece together everything in order.
Nice one. So, with introductions out of the way, let's hop into the animus and go back to the boom of the Industrial Revolution in Victorian London. So, the first thing I'd like us to cover is, what were some of your favourite and least favourite elements about Assassin's Creed Syndicate in terms of, among other factors, story, characters, and gameplay?
I love the story, honestly. I thought, it's a somewhat unpopular opinion, but the jokiness, the campiness, it reminded me of the Sam Raimi films, to be honest. So, I love the one-liners from Jacob throughout the whole thing, and the brother-sister,
chaoticness
banter that they had.
Yeah, I feel like the story itself, it was good. It wasn't like one that relied on like emotion necessarily, or like heavy character development. Like, it didn't reach the like deepness of, like, let's say Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Revelations, Black Flag, stuff like that, but it was still onto something. And if anything, like, the main it mostly relied on, as you said, like Jacob and Evie's relationship as brother and sister, and like the chaoticness that comes with that, the trouble that came with that, and then really having to like set their personalities aside and set that aside for a greater cause. Because I think
they had to build the British Brotherhood back up.
Yeah, definitely.
From the ground.
Because
I think it's very different from like the past AC games where like typically you see the family member die and they go after.
Yeah, like they were already assassins.
Having fun building the London Brotherhood.
They were born into the Brotherhood, and like by the time the game takes place, 1868, they're like only 21, both of them, but they are fully trained assassins, in combat skills, martial arts, free running, all that stuff. So yeah, they are born into the Brotherhood, which as you say, is actually like, now that I think of it, something we didn't necessarily see in previous games was that, because there was always that origin, like, they were born into the Brotherhood, but they didn't really know about their heritage, or they become assassins as the game progresses.
Yeah, we didn't see their training necessarily. They were already
like, take someone like Ezio, like, yeah, he's born into the Brotherhood, but it isn't until like 10, 12 years into the story of AC2 that he like officially becomes an assassin, even though he like worked with assassin accomplices and won the ropes and the hidden blades for like over a decade at that point.
Yeah, it took him a long time.
So it kind of like, and that's a cool element, I guess, about this game, now that you mention it, is that it's like, kind of hops directly into the action. And already, like, the very first mission was that, like, you go through all the stuff that, like, at the time, I guess, made Assassin's Creed what it was. Stealth, hidden blade, you got this target, take him out. Sneaking into that factory as Jacob, which was a pretty cool opening.
Yeah, and I do think they took, like, that typical grindhouse look with, like, introducing everybody when they came on screen to, like, drill into your head, like, not just with the historical people, but with, like, the Templars, too. Because, 80% of them weren't even real, so...
Yeah, that's the thing, I guess, is that, like, in previous games, a lot of the Templars, like, antagonists, they've kind of, they've actually were real historical characters, whereas in this game, a lot of them were fictional.
Yeah.
And that's a good question. Is that kind of like... I actually don't know the reason for that. Is that because like the Victorian era was thin on inspiration, or what
I
was?
think it was still like, I mean, 1860s is still somewhat close historically
Yeah,
to
that
us.
might have
So there's like
been
great grandparents that people could be related to. That
Yeah, I actually think that was.
Searching the name, and it could be dicey.
Now that you mention it, I think I may have read something about that once. Is that like that due to maybe descendants of people from that time still being alive today, that they were more cautious on like fictional characters versus
because
like making a new version of like real life characters, maybe not to violate any legacies or something in that lane.
Yeah, exactly. Like for the most part, every historical character we meet ends up on, the good guys' assassins team, as it were.
Definitely,
like
definitely.
At least allies, but
definitely.
Nothing,
Yeah, like
go.
Actually, I wanted to mention this before. I think you mentioned a bit about like as you said with that like a lot of the game being about Jacob and Evie's relationship as brother and sister, and them having to like almost make a new version of that relationship. Like they have to get on level with each other. I liked how different their personalities were. Jacob was this very brash, I want to say like punk rebellious type guy. Kind of like he didn't really give a about anything. Just like, like he didn't care a lot. He was very informal, I guess you could say. And then there's Evie, who's like very more formal, I guess. Very like knows the history of the Brotherhood and is like more mature, I guess, for better or worse. There's so many examples of that. Like when they first get to London, it's like Evie's like, now we have to find Henry Green, and Jacob's like, who was that again? And she was like, did you not listen the first 3 times? Listen to what? And also like with the rope launcher, and Jacob just like got that destroyed rope gun from that gang leader, and Evie's like, we have to do this and this now, and he's just like, Jacob, focus, and then he's like, I want this right now. And also, especially throughout the story, there was some missions that you could play as either, but then there were, of course, also the missions where it was one character only. And, like, you just see how chaotic their relationship was, and that it really wasn't until the end that they were, like, fully in sync, cooperating.
Yeah. But I think that, like, Syndicate is the prime example of what Ubisoft should do if they really wanted to do this male-female choice thing for their characters. Either make them family like that, or make them love interests.
Of course.
Like Arno and Elise, but make them playable and have them play their own missions.
Of course.
I think Syndicate did it really well with balancing.
Syndicate definitely did it right.
Their own missions where they had their different play styles catered to.
And it was the first time in Assassin's Creed that this like more than one playable character was introduced, which at the time was still new to gaming. Like when I think about it, the first game that really did that was probably Grand Theft Auto 5, which holy shit, is almost a decade old next year. I just felt very old suddenly.
But yeah, they're triple game.
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto 5, not only in the Grand Theft Auto series, but I think like mainstream gaming at the time in general had that you could play as more than one character, and you could like switch between them at any time, like during the open world. There were some story missions that you could play as anyone, and then there were some missions like where you could switch between them during the mission, or some of them were locked to one character. But Syndicate definitely did that well. It probably took a bit of inspiration from GTA 5, maybe not, but it definitely pulled it off well. And I liked how throughout the story, that Jacob, he was really just focused on take out the Templars. That's how we like take back London. Where Evie was more, she was more like, it's not just about that. We also have to see like, how does taking out this guy affect this, and what can that lead to? And at the same time, she was very focused on the Shroud, and that if this Shroud does exist, well, then we need to acquire it before Starrick does. Whereas Jacob, like, he doesn't even believe the first civilization existed. He doesn't believe in the Shroud or anything until, like, the end.
Yeah, he mainly thinks they're fairy tales, but
yeah.
I mean, he knows the lessons, he knows the stories because he sat there.
But he just thinks all of it is like myths and legends and stuff, which just adds to his kind of like more like punk rock, edgy personality. And also throughout the story, a lot of it was a lot of the missions is Jacob, especially like in like towards the middle of the game, is like, you know, you take out the main target as Jacob, but then you switch to Evie and she's like cleaning up the mess he made. Like, one of my favorite moments is when you sneak into the Bank of England to like assassinate the director of the bank or something. But then Evie meets with what's his name, Frederick Aberline, the police sergeant there, and he's just like, it's utter chaos. That like the formula for the British pound has been stolen, and it's like utter chaos.
Like,
the economy.
Can you also return those pleats? That'd be great.
Yeah, like the economy is at risk, and Evie's just like, come on. Yeah, and also
she's always sweeping up behind her brother, but
yeah. Whereas Jacob is just this really, I'm not gonna lie, like
he's like an unstoppable force that drives their cause forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, maybe
right the things he does wrong.
Based on myself, I love Jacob's like kind of edgy person, not really give a fuck personality, but obviously it also does, especially by the end, get to that point where it's like, okay, come on.
Seeing like, this is real yet?
Like, I remember like at the end, you know, the last sequence starts with that scene of the two of them like bickering, arguing on the train, that like, Evie's like, Starrick is gonna make his move tonight. He's gonna kill the queen and like the entire head of state, and Jacob, and he's gonna take the shroud, and Jacob's just like, whatever. And like where sort of. And where they're almost like, look, we're gonna part ways until Henry steps in and is like, come on, one last, then you can like go off and never see each other again. But that is ultimately their redemption, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think Henry definitely brings them together.
Yeah, Henry's kind of like that.
Knowing his story, his backstory with being, you know, Agazmir's son and getting shunned from the Brotherhood for a while and then having to train them.
Yeah, Henry was kind of like that middle character. Middleman, I suppose.
Yeah. He kept throwing himself in harm's way for Evie too, which was a little over the top, but
yeah, I mean, that's a thing, like, could the Henry Evie relationship, could that have been built upon more throughout the game?
Yeah, it came in spurts, but it was only like 3 or 4 times that they really like flirt with each other.
And like, so from what I remember, the canon is that like after the game, the two of them get married and stuff. Actually,
yeah, because I think by Locust they're already like established together, if not married.
Yeah, but Henry was still like a cool character, I guess, and really when I think about it in terms of character, Syndicate like kept it rather limited compared to previous games, like in terms of like who the main assassin team is made up of. Like it's really only Jacob, Evie, and Henry.
And what was his name? Their friend from Crawley.
Aberline?
Was friends with their dad.
Not Frederick Aberline. Yeah,
Aberline.
I think I remember.
There was one other assassin.
I think I know who you mean. I just can't remember his name.
But yeah, the one at the very start when they're leaving Crawley, it's like.
Yeah, he's like kind of the.
Westhouse? Is that his name? George Westhouse?
Maybe, I don't know. Whatever, we'll get to that if it is, but yeah, it's kind of like the main like heroes team, I guess, was made up of fewer people this time, which ultimately worked, I think. Whereas like
it kept it focused.
And in terms of like Templar antagonist, I'm not gonna lie, Crawford Starrick was not the most interesting character to date, like Templar antagonist to date.
I'll give you that. Like he had a trading company, you know, that could throw the Templar influence into a worldwide spin, but He was mostly in the background from like the
Yeah,
majority of
like
the story, right until he started, dancing with.
yeah,
So
but all like in terms of development and to that final battle, the only impression of him you really got was that he's evil for the sake of it. He's like a maniac who just wants to rule the world for the sake of it. Like, let's think of other Templar antagonists. Like,
evil guy.
yeah, like Hatham is probably one of the best like Templar antagonists. Be like not only given his Kenway heritage, of course, but also because the first like
his
1/3 of Assassin's Creed 3 you actually play as him. Like you really get to know him on a personal level, which just adds so much more depth to him. I'm also trying to.
We get a song and dance, literally.
Yeah, and even in like Black Flag, Torres is actually I think one of the better Templars as well. Even if he's in the shadows for most of the game, you get the impression that he's this quite sinister guy.
I feel like Torres is a lot like Sidious from Star Wars. Like,
yeah, kind of like that older, creepy dude who like, yeah. But let's say more about Torres for the Black Flag retrospective, I guess. I mean, that kind of makes me think in general, like in terms of strong Templar antagonists, it's kind of like a bit hit and miss. Like like the Ezio trilogy also has some well-developed ones, like Rodrigo Borgia. He's probably the best one, I guess, at the end of the day.
I feel like in Syndicate anyway, like Lucy Thorne would be.
That's her name.
More
I have forgotten her last name. I have forgotten her last name, but I remember her, Lucy Thorne. Yeah, she was like kind of her Asterix right-hand woman. Until her and Evie.
On the front lines, though, while he's in his castle.
Yeah, her and Evie fight at the top of St. Paul's, I think it is. Like she, like jumps out the window or something, and then there's that quite awesome mission where where Evie goes, takes the ferry down to the Tower of London to like properly assassinate her once and for all, because she was looking for the shroud at Tower, from what I remember. But it turns out it was under Buckingham Palace.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think in terms of characters there, like it had some great assassin characters because it also tried and kept it somewhat limited for once, but the same can't really be said for maybe Templar antagonists for once. Which, yeah, I don't know if that's like a good or bad thing.
I mean, I thought the fact that they were able to come up with plausible Templars for the time, and like what they were involved with like the child factories or the trading company like Stark had, or they had important.
It just reminds
roles.
me, Maxwell Roth was actually like. Then again, he was kind of like just as much gang leader, dedicated to his gang, as he was fully to the Templars, but he was still like an interesting, quite mysterious character.
Yeah, he was pretty enigmatic, like bouncing both sides.
It makes me think, what is it the like enemy gang was called? It was the Rooks versus
the Blighters.
The Blighters, that's right. Which Maxwell Roth was the leader of, and it's kind of like until that point, it's kind of like it was Bloods versus Crips, but London 1868 edition. So you think they were like arch enemies. Until like Sequence 8, when Jacob and Maxwell actually start working together, and that turns out to be a disaster when Jacob finds out he's willing to let children die in an explosion, and I never got what in the world was that kiss about? Like when Jacob is assassinating him, and like why in the world does Starrick start kissing, or Maxwell Roth start kissing Jacob? What? I never got that.
Because he's, I think. What they were going for is that he's essentially a Joker character. He just wants to watch the world burn. He doesn't care what's
probably
going on.
That.
He's just there to shut up and have a good time. So.
Yeah, maybe you're onto something. Yeah, but I think now that I think of it, in terms of like standout characters, one thing that was actually quite interesting were like the real life characters, like the historical figures, like Queen some guy's name I forget, Charles Dickens.
tossing his papers. For...
Yeah, like a lot of those were kind of like the main side missions of the game as well. It was the London stories, I think they were called.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, kind of like the side missions, but had the structure of like main missions. They were for all those real life historical characters.
Yeah, to make them.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was 5 different ones. It was Queen Victoria, Charles Dickens, Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, and then there was a 5th guy, wasn't there?
Alexander Graham Bell, I think.
Maybe that was. Oh man, it's been a while since I played Syndicate in reality, so there may be like a few points where I am a bit rusty, but oh well. but in terms of like overall gameplay wise, like I'm not gonna lie, I feel like Syndicate is one of the best games in terms of that.
I think the combat is pretty fun. There's a little bit of the damage sponging showing in Syndicate right before they got to Origins and all.
The combat system was quite good, definitely. It wasn't the easy like BX counter kill, which were like
it's not counter to win.
No, but
you gotta work for it.
Yeah, and it wasn't totally like Unity's combat system as well. But there were like it was quite good. Like it was.
Yeah, there's good.
It wasn't too easy without being too difficult.
Yeah, and even like freehand melee for both of them felt totally different. That was really cool.
And a good play. I remember a good place to always train the combat skills were in the fight clubs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fighting.
Which were also quite a fun side mission. Especially like, and sometimes it would take a few tries. Like it's the one in Westminster where it's like 8 rounds or something, and there's just like one round maybe 20 like big dudes, and it's just like it's about like given your health doesn't regenerate during the fight. It's about really like combining it and trying to get like the double kills or triple kills where possible.
Or throwing them into each other.
Yeah, but I think in terms of like side missions and gameplay in general, as I said, Syndicate has got to be one of my favorites, just because it felt very diverse. The gameplay, like there was a lot of different stuff to do. Everything felt very different, and each of them felt unique. Like you had the main stories, you had the side missions, and then you had stuff like the fight clubs and the carriage races.
The mysteries too were really cool.
Yeah, and like especially that's probably one of the best side missions was like conquering the boroughs, the different boroughs, where there was everything from like where the gang stronghold was definitely the most exciting one. That was just and mostly because that was just classic Assassin's Creed in the best way possible. It's just like stealth. Yeah, like you need to take out like the gang leader. You need to like maybe burn some gang plans, and just like try and stay undetected. But and then there were the various collectibles and stuff. Actually makes me think like
cool
I never really collected a lot of the Helix points, I think it was called. But I have always heard the more of them you collected, like the more, secret files would be regenerated, and you would learn some interesting things in the database, like about Desmond's son and whatnot.
Yeah, there was. I remember that. There was a little recording of them having found him. Like his mother took him to a hospital, and they registered his name, and that's how they found his DNA and traced it back, and they showed the same bloodline as Subject 17, showing like all these similar family members of people in Paris, people in the Middle East, people in the Caribbean, same lineage. So they were like, let's pick that boy up. But I think, if I remember right, Gramatica wanted to take him and just put him in Anonymous for like 20 years in that recording, and then I think it's Isabelle Ardant is also in the recording, and she's like, no, I don't agree with that. That boy's gonna be mine.
That reminds me that like, I think the modern day wise, Syndicate was a bit of trolling, but still alright. I remember there were like interviews with Marc-Alexis Coté. He was like saying modern day is back, and we're like, oh, modern day, we're gonna be able to like play modern day. but really it was just like 10 minutes worth of cutscenes, which was like, okay. But still, I think it was alright, like, in terms of where it went, like, there were... Yeah, there were a lot of familiar faces that were back. That was pretty cool, like Sean and Rebecca, and then Galena, of course, and then like a face like Otso Berg as well, and then the whole like that the game basically ends with them clashing underneath Buckingham Palace there, where the shroud is.
Yeah, it would have been nice to be able to play it, or maybe at least control one of the drones that's visualizing the scene. But...
And I just remember that, like, it was onto a lot of different stuff, like the modern day, also, as you mentioned, with Dr. Grammatica and that, and, like, how the game ends with Juno, like, appearing on the screen there. But I always heard that, like, that... Yeah, but I hear that storyline was just wrapped in, like, the most anticlimactic way in, like, a comic book or something, where it's just like, come on. Whereas you think that will kind of set the premise for modern day going forward, but I guess not. But like, yeah, it kind of sucked that you weren't able to play it, but like, in terms of what it did for the modern day, like in terms of what would have worked as good setups, and like in terms of familiar faces, it was one of the better modern day storylines.
Yeah, had it been paid off in a future game, that would have been one of the best setups in the series.
Definitely.
But the fact that like basically like the whole Phoenix project and what happened with Juno both got knocked out in the comics kind of cheapens the ending of the game.
Definitely. Modern day was alright.
I was more interested in the stuff that you can get about the pieces of Eden in the past.
Sure.
It's like, I know you and I talked briefly, but I'll bring it up on here, that like back in David Brewster's lab scene when he's electrifying that apple, you skirt around while you're going to find him and take him out. You can find the head of Saint Denis in his lab before it blows up. So it kind of implies that it's the same.
One that Arno finds like 80 years earlier.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Because, I mean, it quote unquote gets destroyed in the lab explosion, but we just know that the lab got destroyed.
Perhaps not.
Destroyed.
Perhaps not. I think the final like gameplay thing I wanted to talk about quickly was that was another like side mission, I guess, almost side like reality I quite like, was the whole World War I setting.
Absolutely.
Like the whole like Animus glitch setting, whatever really it quite was about. That is like there's this portal like halfway through the game spawned at like the end of the Thames that takes you like 50 years into the future. And suddenly you're playing as Lydia Fry, and I quite like the little mini storyline there, like the different like you kind of had to conquer the area. You had to like take care of this
takeover in the future.
This and that stronghold, just like taking over the borough. And then it all ended with Juno. With Juno, what was that?
I think she's Jacob's granddaughter.
Yeah, that was it. She's Jacob's granddaughter. Which obviously tells us that either after like in between like after the game Jacob also gets married or something and has a kid. And then the whole thing like when you had killed that Templar Grandmaster who also turned out to be another sage. Like I remember Juno appears sounding very ominous, menacing, threatening. I can't remember what it is she says, but it's like a message, to the I will be back.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And it was cool, and it was like a cool mini-map as well. And it was kind of like, you kind of got to, although in a future setting, it was like kind of you got to explore a part of London that wasn't on the main map. Because like something like the Tower of London, even though I kind of thought it would be, wasn't on the main map. It was only in a few missions here and there. Even if it is very, very, like, I'm currently living in London, even if, like, the tower is very close to, like, St. Paul's Cathedral, stuff like that. But, you couldn't fit everything in there. But it also cool, then you had Tower Bridge, which I remember was quite fun to, like, climb up, like, the open ramp, that was quite fun to, like, climb up. And it was also, there was another familiar face, Winston Churchill, which is, like, was kind of like the perfect opportunity, I guess. See him in like a pre-World War II setting and stuff. But yeah, I definitely quite liked the. I did quite like that World War One like alternative setting, and Lydia was.
Yeah, I wish they explored it just a little more.
And it was pretty cool to see Lydia like another assassin, but even further up in time. Like I think that took place in like 1916, and also the way you got to like you could like grab the big machine guns and shoot down like German warplanes and stuff. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I think
like the most modern that we had.
Yeah, definitely. Just in general, Syndicate is the most modern Assassin's Creed game there is, and I remember at first a lot of people were skeptical about it, but ultimately everything paid off. Like in terms of like the weapons you had a revolver now suddenly, and which could like fire multiple bullets at once, and but it worked. And the rope launcher may have been a bit like over the top here and there, but it still worked quite well, and it was a very cool tool.
I thought it was really
a lot of fun to
a
use.
good tool to get across. Like it was basically the Victorian Spider-Man, so
Definitely.
I was fine with it.
It was a lot of fun.
But
yeah. And customization, that reminds me, like...
For the ones that didn't like it, they could just climb if they wanted to, too. They
Sure.
still kept all the same puzzle mechanics of climbing in the buildings, which I really enjoyed.
That reminds me, like, in terms of character customization, it was definitely a step down from Unity, but it was similar, but with, like, less options and more presets. There was still a lot of cool outfits. Definitely still a lot of cool outfits, weapons. Like the way that the weaponry for once was very small, given that, you know, it was a time where you couldn't just carry massive swords and axes on your back anymore. You know, so it would kind of be something you could hide on your body. So you could choose between, like, what was it, the kukri or the cane sword or the brass knuckles. I typically went kukri for Jacob and the cane sword for Evie. That's how I typically always went with it.
Same.
Yeah. But there was still a lot of cool outfits for them still. Like, try them out in different colors. They had different assassin gauntlets and stuff, and yeah.
I really like the Aegis suit, too. Did you end up getting the Aegis suit for Evie?
Which one?
The Minerva's Aegis.
Oh yeah, I got that one. That was when you had collected all of the music boxes, I think it was.
Yeah.
You go to that like underground temple where like Minerva's outfit has been there forever and it's bulletproof. Is that what it is, or?
You turn invisible while crouched.
Evie already turns invisible, like regardless. I can't remember what.
Like in them, but I think she does it like if she's out of sight, you can do it in sight too.
Maybe I can't remember, but it did have some
like
special
that, but
perks.
You get a couple little like damage buffs too.
But that was another cool thing that was like a skill that was exclusive to Evie. Was that like stand so still? Oh, well, now that I think of it, that Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy would have liked that power, I guess. Stand so incredibly still that you become invisible to the eye.
See me.
That's that. Now that that's the first time I think of it like that. But yeah. Other than that, I can't really think of any like other things that like that to cover on this aspect. So maybe we move on. That's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk a bit about, like, do you feel like AC Syndicate ever became a proper household title in the AC franchise? And how's the game's legacy looked upon today, here almost 7 years later?
As we kind of discussed, like, the brother-sister dynamic of it is looked on fondly, but at the same time, like, with how campy and jokey it is, I think it's kind of lampooned itself, and I know that a lot of fans see it as a joke rather than a serious Assassin's Creed title because it doesn't take itself so seriously.
Like, the thing is that I feel like Syndicate kind of it came out at a weird time. Like, it was only a year after Assassin's Creed Unity, which, you know, had the worst launch ever, and we also talked about that like in a previous episode when we covered had the Unity retrospective. It was because the game was rushed. It was built on this brand new engine for PS4, Xbox One only, which just clearly wasn't ready at all. And Unity just had the worst launch ever, which, obviously
They really should have given it
got a
more
lot
years.
of people to turn their head against Assassin's Creed, which kind of like, put Syndicate in a bad spot, considering, oh great, another game built on the same engine, it's just going to be another crap fest. But then, like, it came out, and I actually remember, like, a lot of reviews were, like, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. Like, the reviews were very good, saying that, like, a strong comeback for Assassin's Creed, and I fully agree with those reviews. But in terms of, like, how household the title is, like, the game is, it's probably one of really the less critically acclaimed, like, the least talked about ones. Do you know what I mean?
Honestly, yeah, I would put it in the same category, if not just barely higher than Rogue, just because of Rogue's side launch with Unity. It's one of the least talked about in the mainland.
Syndicate is one of my favorite games. It's been a while since I've really thought about how I'd rank the AC games, so it definitely makes the top 3 for me, Syndicate. Just given that, it's a lot of fun gameplay-wise, has a very bright and fun tone, which I guess is nice here and then. And the London map is
underbelly of London.
Yeah, and the London map itself was very well made. Like, it's very accurate to real life London, both in terms of like everything to see and size wise. It covers most of like central London, City of London, Westminster, the Strand, stuff like that. Like southern London, and obviously, and kind of like explore London in a way that you can't really today. With all the Victorian setting, which make for some cool virtual tourism, I guess. Kind of like be taken back in time, see London in a different day and age, where it also felt very real, which was a cool element. But I will agree with you that can be because of like, maybe, as you say, the story or stuff, or that it was just like only a year after Unity, that it kind of like...
the story, it's partially... everybody was on Assassin's Creed burnout by
Syndicate. Definitely, and I remember it was a time where people were just like, look, there's been a new Assassin's Creed game every fucking year for the past 6 years now, we need a break. So Syndicate was kind of... I guess you can say Syndicate was kind of the franchise going on hiatus with a bang, I guess.
We're going to try one more thing and then we're going to touch up for a little bit.
But it was at a time where people needed a break from Assassin's Creed, so kind of like, even if the game didn't have a lot of positive reception, it just never... And there can be many reasons for that. It just never quite became the household title that other games in the franchise were, like Assassin's Creed 2 or Black Flag, like the major milestones, like the most talked about ones, the kind of the timeless ones, I guess you can call it. Syndicate never really became that.
It's not skip worthy though. I think the story holds its own.
Definitely, and even as I said, for me, it is one of the better Assassin's Creed games. Even if it's been like a long time now since I played it last, I still love playing it. It's a lot of fun. I guess I have some nostalgia with it, some good nostalgic memories with it, considering it was also the first Assassin's Creed game I ever got on release, like the first one I got on release date, because that was around the time I had gotten into Assassin's Creed as well. So I guess Syndicate is kind of the special one for me there. So even if it is a great game and stuff, there were just different, circumstances there.
It's one of the ones I quote often with, what's this greeting? Assassin's Christmas.
Oh, I love that quote. I love that quote. Iconic, yeah. I also remember Jacob saying, like, when he murders that, like, manacles guy who has, like, control of the Houses of Parliament or whatever, Jacob's just like, what a prick. Yeah. So, even if Syndicate is a very good game, I think given like the state of Assassin's Creed at the time and stuff, and just never allowed for it to become the proper household title other games are. And it definitely, especially among like casual and hardcore Assassin's Creed fans. Of course, we've played it. We still know it in and out. As you say, we quote it. We still talk about it and stuff.
But like you said, it also went up against things like Grand Theft Auto 5 at the same time.
Yeah, so like I guess outside the AC community and like us who have played it, it never really, and even within the community as well, it never became the proper household title that other games have become.
Yeah, and I kind of wish it would, so that they would make a Lydia Frye game.
Perhaps. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's a good game. It's one you can always come back to, even here many years later, but it's not one that's like it's not one that properly left its stamp compared to like Assassin's Creed 2, which here almost 13 years later is still one of the most beloved Assassin's Creed games, and just like video games in general of like the 00s and like the early 10s and stuff.
Definitely.
Like Assassin's Creed 2 is
one of the greatest games.
I also said that back when we did our Ezio trilogy retrospective. Assassin's Creed 2 is in a lot of ways the only Assassin's Creed game which has become a proper household Assassin's Creed game. Kind of like, as you said, along the lines of Grand Theft Auto 5 and like video games that have really gone down in history.
Play Assassin's Creed to know who Ezio is.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But you're gonna be like, Assassin's Creed in London? That's a thing? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright. I wanted to, unless there's more to cover on this, I wanted to talk about one last thing, and that was, of course, the Jack the Ripper expansion that came out for this game. How did you like that one?
I thought it was really neat, using fear tactics and all that.
I'm not gonna...
One little thing of note that is in there, if I remember right, I think it is, that Jack the Ripper uses smell. That's why he can smell around walls. Like, that's part of his eagle vision, is how you smell also. I
can't remember if it was smell, but it might be there was some sort of extra sense to it for him.
Fear.
Yeah, there was like a fear element. You could like scare nearby enemies, like if they were frightened enough, like if that's because they see you mutilate someone or because you use fear gas on them, mystical Indian fear gas, they become too frightened that they're like crippled. Like they're not going to try to fight you. You don't even have to kill them. But I'm not going to lie, Jack the Ripper is my favorite Assassin's Creed story expansion. Out of like, I feel like it's the one that had the most consistent story, and it's one that actually had you like caring for what was going on, because other expansions like Freedom Cry or like Dead Kings, like sure there's some cool missions and stuff, but it was kind of like not really one that like story wise it wasn't really one that was kind of like had you making you nervous or like, oh wow, what's going to happen now? It never really did anything to keep you intrigued. It was kind of like just some extra missions, get to play as like sad old man, alcoholic Arno, or play as Adewale for once, who, is one of the standout characters of Black Flag, kind of having issues for once. Whereas I also like a lot of like thriller, like crime movies, kind of like Zodiac and stuff. And Jack the Ripper is just like, story-wise, delivered there on every point imaginable. I still so clearly remember when I first played the opening, like there when Jacob is in that old apartment trying to grab his things, knowing he's being followed, and then Jack is just like there behind him, just like, your time has come. And then they fight it out, and he's just like, I am the solution. And then the screen turns to black, and you're like, what the hell just happened? Yeah, like, and then it turns like that, like the theme, like the piano theme, which was quite a good one, like very sinister. And it's just like, and then it pops up that very grey afternoon in London, it's snowing, and the title, and I mean that opening is probably one of the best openings like in Assassin's Creed like ever.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, and
I think I think it's one of the best boss fights in Assassin's Creed, honestly.
Maybe as well. Tension. And even if the Jack the Ripper sequence itself was very short, only about 10 missions and can be completed in like no more than a couple hours, it was still a very enjoyable story, and also the way it switched between you playing as Evie and actually the Ripper himself. Like in that first memory, you actually play as the Ripper chasing down Jacob, which was quite a weird thing.
Yeah, it felt wrong.
Yeah, in a way, definitely.
Cool to put us on our toes.
Yeah, and it just like showed you that like the Ripper's actually a former assassin. He has all the skills like the free running, rope launcher, all that stuff, and then he's just this terrifying psycho killer as well, which was definitely quite nice. And then also I liked how it a lot of times took you outside the main map, and even the main London map was like heavily reduced. Like it was only 2 boroughs this time around, the City of London and Whitechapel. Like you couldn't access Westminster, which made sense ultimately.
Keep in line with the murders, but
but as I said, what I liked about it is that there were some missions that really took you outside the map. You went to that like fashion lady's mansion up north with like the big garden and stuff. You remember that?
Right.
It also took you to that abandoned asylum where there's also that ship where like first Evie goes and then the Ripper you play as the Ripper at that exact same location right afterwards because he has to tie up loose ends.
Yeah.
And then like at the end it takes you inside Lambeth Asylum again, and and then what I liked in general about it was like how dark it felt, like how like dark and ominous and like gloomy it felt. Like even when you were in
very tense throughout the whole
like thing. Even just like throughout the whole game had a very dark vibe to it, both story wise and like color wise and weather wise. Like whereas in the main game you could sometimes see the most like amazing clear blue sky sunset, it would somehow always be a bit cloudy in this game. Also maybe given that from what I remember it takes place like during the late fall winter. So yeah, it just in general had this very dark vibe to it, even just when playing like the open world, like the much smaller open world, but still with a few side missions, collectibles, all that stuff. It in general, just felt very dark, which definitely like suited the tone of the little expansion. So in my book, like, and even if I've seen some people say that like Jack the Ripper wasn't that good an expansion for them, but in my book, it's flawless, pretty much. Definitely the best Assassin's Creed expansion.
Cool. It incorporated new mechanics to the game and actually expanded like what you can do in the game.
And it was also just cool to see an expansion that was set so long after, like the main game, and see them as older. Play as an older Evie and stuff, and like so much has happened in those 20 years since the main game. Obviously, like Evie has been a wife. Jacob has been rebuilding the Brotherhood, obviously, which we get like led to the creation of the Ripper. Was like a failed training and stuff. And if anything, now that
wasn't ready to train somebody, now
and it quickly reminds me in terms of what we talked about in the beginning of the episode here, like in terms of the main game exploring Evie and Jacob's relationship, them still being young and kind of having to like properly become brother and sister, find that brother-sister love, which is something you can definitely see has that has gotten so much stronger in 1888, though they're 20 years later.
Definitely.
They're older, they're more mature.
As soon as she needs it.
Yeah, I definitely.
But she's also more mature about it.
Because I remember towards the end, like when she has been like trying to find the Ripper, wondering is Jacob even alive, and then she finds him there all beaten, possibly with the loss of an eye.
Maybe.
I mean, either he's just been beaten up.
I don't know.
Either he's just been beaten up so good that it's swollen, or he's lost his eye. I don't know.
Could be.
But I do.
Would be a neat echo, actually.
But you just remember like Evie finding him there, being so relieved. Jacob like barely like he's just so beaten, but he's so happy to see her, and she's so happy to see him. You can definitely see that like they have started to love each other in a way that they didn't necessarily 20 years ago when they were young, but now they're older, they're more mature, and like their fraternity has definitely reached a new level of love, I guess, which also makes for quite nice development. And also compared to some of the other expansions where I said you play as Adewale, who was like a good character, but then you play as him 10 years later and it's not like anything necessarily has been added to him. And like something like Dead Kings takes place so shortly after the main Unity game that it's kind of like it feels like the same Arno, only apparently he's been like drinking for many years and has become depressed and whatnot.
Yeah. I think it's a much more depressed Arno.
So yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot of interesting stuff. Do you have anything to add here?
I guess the only other thing I would add is there's one other thing that's up for debate in the lore that I think some more people should think about. The shroud, when we put it back in Buckingham Palace, and then you see it in the modern day, there's a box that Isabel Ardant pulls out of the altar that the shroud was put into, and the box itself has Isu, like the same molecule looking pattern all over it. So
I've never paid attention to that.
Floating around.
I've never paid attention to that. I'm not gonna lie.
It's the same box that's handed to Grammatica when he gets it. It's a precursor box, but it's not counted.
Oh right. Yeah. I guess like in terms of Syndicate is maybe one of those games that kind of like for once didn't focus that much on like First Civilization Isu lore compared to like previous games, Black Flag, and like sure it was kind of still, you could feel everything was going to lead up to finding the shroud and everything, but like throughout the game it wasn't like a key factor. So yeah,
not quite as much as previous games now.
Definitely not. Alright then, I think we've covered just about everything. I'm surprised we've even talked about this apparently not very household Assassin's Creed game for this long, but I guess it's just because you and me are quite big fans of it and stuff, so yeah. Anyway, then I just want to thank all of you for listening to episode 21 of the Memory Corridor. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay up to date on everything happening on the ones who came before and more things Assassin's Creed. Links to everybody's social media pages can be found down below. As always, if anyone has feedback and or topic ideas for future episodes, feel free to share it in the comments. Now, once again, thanks for watching and listening, everyone. I hope to see all of you for the next episodes, and until those come out, stay safe and keep the community what it is. And of course, thanks to Mr. Spider-Man for joining me here on the episode. I hope you had a good time.
Thanks for having me. I did.
No worries. You're welcome to come back anytime. And that sums up this episode and our retrospective look at AC Syndicate. Stay safe and active, everyone. See you later, Assassins. Peace.